making spring onion milk bread buns using the Tangzhong method. This is an Asian method where we take a liquid such as milk or water and we cook it with flour to cook it down to a paste. What this paste does is that it helps trap moisture within your dough. So your bread will become much fluffier, it will rise much higher, as well it will last a lot longer. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that bell notification as well as the subscribe button to stay updated with recipes each week. Let's get started. Today I will be using water instead of milk to make the paste, and the ratio is typically around 1 to 5, 1 being flour and 5 being liquid. Let's add the two together in a pan and stir until it's smooth. Honestly, this part is a teeny bit boring, but please be patient when you are making this and refrain from turning up the heat to prevent burning. Continue stirring until your paste thickens, and once ready, transfer it into a bowl and allow it to cool down to room temperature. Remember to cover it to prevent it from drying, and you can keep this in the fridge until ready to use, but no more than 2 days. For our dough, I recommend using a stand mixer or else you will be kneading forever. Start off by adding 2 teaspoons of salt into the flour. I'm using all-purpose, but you can use bread flour as well. Then add your 20 grams of sugar and let's make a well in the dry ingredients for our wet ingredients to sit in. Because I am using active dry yeast, I will need to bloom it first in warm milk and sugar. Keep in mind not to have the milk too hot or you will kill the yeast. If you have instant dry yeast, you can add this directly into your flour without blooming it. Allow the yeast mixture to sit for 10 minutes. This film of yeast floating on top of the milk signifies that our yeast is ready. If you don't see this film, it could be because the milk was too hot or the yeast has expired. Crack 2 eggs into the mixture and whisk to break the eggs apart. Let's add the wet ingredients into the well of our dry ingredients. Next, we will need our Tangzhong paste. Make sure that this is at room temperature before plopping it in. Plop. Use the hook attachment for your stand mixer and start off on low speed. When using the hook attachment for mixing dough, you should never go anywhere past speed level 2. As you are mixing, remember to stop every now and then to scrape down the bowl. Oftentimes there is extra flour at the bottom that hasn't been incorporated yet. Once the dough stops to stick to the sides of the bowl, add in room temperature butter. It's important that the butter is soft enough so that it can easily be mixed into the dough. As we continue mixing the fat in, you will see that the dough will begin to look much smoother. I like to take the dough off the stand mixer a little bit before the butter has been fully incorporated. This isn't necessary, but it's good to feel the texture of the dough so that you know what finished dough feels like. As well, this can prevent over kneading. Again, I would suggest using a stand mixer because I almost broke my wrist or twisted it when I made the first knead on the dough and as I was continuing to knead it. Next, shape the dough into a ball and allow it to rise. Coat it in a bit of oil before covering it, and you can also let it rise overnight at room temperature or in the fridge. This is the dough after 2 hours of rising at room temperature, and you can see that the dough is already super big and it's super stretchy and smooth. I kind of want to put it over my face and see if I can look like Dwight from The Office when he skinned that mannequin's face. Anyways, let's coat our dough again in oil. This isn't necessary, but I don't want my dough drying out. And of course, release the air so that it has a little bit more space to grow. Cover the bowl again and let the dough continue rising. Of course, you guys don't have to keep opening it up to release the air. I'm just showing you guys how stretchy the dough has already become after a couple of hours sitting in room temperature. Now it looks like a butt. Okay, after 24 hours. This part is totally optional, but I tend to like my buns with fillings. I don't know why everything sounds so wrong when I do these videos. Anyways, today I will be using spring onions. If you know how to properly prep these spring onions, feel free to skip ahead. I'm just finely chopping them and then adding them to a pan with a little bit of oil to stir fry it until it's slightly softened. You can also add a bit of finely chopped onions and garlic into the spring onions to add to your bread. If you don't want to do that, you can always just leave it plain or add a bit of cheese or pecans or raisins. Just have fun with it. While your filling is cooling down, make sure your dough is at room temperature and release the air from it. If it has been in the fridge, take it out 1 hour before using. Alright, yeah, more stretching. We get the point. Sorry, I just can't help it. Okay, let's take out a metal sheet or any type of working surface you're using and lightly flour it to prevent the dough from sticking. Shape the dough into a ball and start cutting it into equal portions. Here I'm going to cut them into 4 balls and then cut those balls into 3 balls. So in the end, you will have 12 balls. That's a lot of balls. After you have shaped all of the balls, we are going to place them nicely on a tray and put a plastic wrap over it and allow it to rest for 15 minutes. Using a wet cheesecloth instead of plastic wrap is totally fine as well. For anybody who is not adding filling into their bread, you can skip this step, but keep watching to see how we wrap our dough up. Let's start with rolling it out. Then go very generous on the onions or whatever filling you're using. Feel free to add a little bit salt as well if you want it a little bit more savory. This part is going to get a little bit messy because we are going to roll the dough out again. So you'll see that the spring onions are going to just pop out from the sides. It's probably a better idea not to tuck the dough in and seal it completely. You'll see that there's a lot of air trapped inside the dough. Right now I'm just going to flatten out the dough again and add more spring onions. It's a good idea to add more spring onions because as the dough rises in the oven, it's going to keep pushing the onions outwards, so it's good to cover every inch and corner of that dough. Once you feel that you have just enough onions, fold the right and the left side of the dough towards the middle. Then roll from top to bottom and make sure you seal the dough together. So you're just pinching the dough together just like that. And you'll see our dough looks like a very cute little pillow. I'm using an 8.5 by 4.5 inch Pyrex tray here. You can use a non-stick baking tray as well. Oil the sides and the base of your tray if you are not using parchment paper, and place 3 of your bread dough into the tray with a bit of space in between them. Cover it and allow it to rise in a warm area for 2 hours. I put my dough in direct sunlight, and after 2 hours you can see how much it has risen. Just look at the before and after here. Now that we have our dough nice and plump, we can move on to the egg wash. The egg wash will help give your bread that really nice golden brown color, and you can mix either milk or water into the egg. Just remember to break up the egg whites. I'm using a spatula to brush over my dough, but feel free to use an actual brush. I just find it easier to wash a spatula than digging through all those bristles. I'm adding sesame seeds, but you can also sprinkle cheese. I would recommend adding that when the dough is almost done baking to prevent the cheese from burning. Lastly, preheat your oven before throwing your dough in to bake. Ta-da! Our bread is finally done and we can eat it! Actually, you should probably let it cool down for just a little bit, but don't let it sit in the tray for more than 10 minutes because the moisture will start to build up and make the base of the bread soggy. Let's open it up and see how fluffy and soft it is. The texture is so fluffy and it's so soft. It's not like Western bread that's a little bit more on the dense side. It's very moist as well. I could keep eating this. Some final thoughts for this recipe is that it is so good. You guys need to try this at home, and feel free to add more spring onions and a little bit more salt into it. If you don't want to add spring onions, you can leave it plain as well, or you can add a bit of raisins to make it a little bit sweeter, or you can add in cheese or maybe sesame seeds. I'm sure it would taste just as good. This recipe actually makes 4 loaves, so 4 of these, like the size of my face. So I actually didn't use up all of my dough. I kept half of it in the fridge for when I'm ready to use it. I would recommend not keeping it for more than 3 days because the yeast is going to start to ferment and give it a sour taste or a sour smell as well. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification to stay updated with recipes each week. I'll see you next time. Bye!